welcome to News at this hour. I am Sandhya. We'll begin with a look at the headlines.
Supporters of militancy are against the basic ethos of Kashmiri culture, says Vajpayeee. Transporters strike enters sixth day, threatens to affect industry. New Zealand and Delhi hospital tests positive for SARS.
News now in detail. Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayeee has accused Islamabad of perpetrating violence in Jammu and Kashmir for over a decade and declared its designs would not succeed. Addressing the convocation of Kashmir University, the Prime Minister said the people who supported militancy were against the basic ethos of Kashmiri culture and Sufi Islam. The Hurriyat conference in Jammu and Kashmir, which had called for a two-day strike during Prime Minister Vajpayee's visit to the valley, has called off today's shutdown. The Hurriyat claimed that they have withdrawn the strike as the purpose of the two-day shutdown has been served with a total and exemplary response to the call yesterday. People in Kashmir have welcomed the Hurriyat's decision to call off the shutdown.
जो ये हुआ था जो फैसला किया ये मेरे ख्याल से ठीक फैसला था क्योंकि कल वाजपेयी साहब ने भी कहा कि
Hello and welcome to News at this hour. I am Sandhya. We'll begin with a look at the headlines.
Supporters of militancy are against the US and Britain have destroyed Iraq. They should rebuild it, says Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad. US Army takes over control of Baghdad from the Marines.
பெரிய மீன் சேதுபதிக்கு பிறந்த சின்ன மீன் அப்பு சார் புது மாப்பிள்ளைக்கு நல்ல யோகமடா அந்த மன மகிழ்ந்தா அந்த நேரமடா உடனடியா அந்த ராஜாவை தீர்த்துடு யார் யாவன் நான் செஞ்ச தப்புக்கெல்லாம் அவன் மாட்டிட்டு தவிக்கிறான் வாசல் வந்த கண்களுக்கும்
News now from the world scene. Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has said the United States and Britain should take on the responsibility to rebuild Iraq, especially since they are the countries that destroyed it. Not mincing his words, Mahathir said military action against Iraq had been unwarranted.
No, I think lots of other people can reconstruct. If they know how to destroy Iraq, they should know how to rebuild Iraq.
Criticizing the US, Mahathir said the world will have to accustom itself to living with one superpower, the US. Mahathir said the US will not think twice about using force or taking unilateral decisions to achieve its ends.
Countries, so that
US Marines have been pulled out from the streets of Baghdad. They are being replaced by small groups of the US Army infantry following Friday's massive anti-American demonstrations. The protests were a warning of hostility the US may face in coming weeks in Iraq. Meanwhile, foreign ministers of countries neighboring Iraq met in Riyadh. The Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Prince Saud al-Faisal said the US-led forces who invaded Iraq had no legitimate right to exploit its oil, and UN sanctions should end only when Iraq has a legitimate government in place.
The US Marines have left Baghdad after tens of thousands of protesters demanded that the United States leave Iraq. Meanwhile, foreign ministers of Iraq's neighboring countries met in Riyadh. They called on the United Nations to take a central role in rebuilding the country. The meeting called for US forces to leave quickly and warned Washington against trying to exploit Iraq's oil wealth.
North Korea has announced it is successfully reprocessing more than 8,000 spent nuclear fuel rods. The step could allow the country to produce atomic weapons. The announcement lent an extra edge to the three-nation consultations held in Washington on Friday on the North Korean nuclear crisis.
North Korea's official news agency, the KCNA, issued a statement in English that Pyongyang was successfully reprocessing more than 8,000 spent nuclear fuel rods. It was a dramatic escalation in the North Korean nuclear crisis. It set in doubt whether the United States would attend the first formal talks with China and North Korea. Of a Korean language report, North Korea was on the verge of reprocessing spent nuclear fuel rods, while Pyongyang's English statement said it is already doing it. Some sources said the development fitted into North Korea's past pattern of raising the stakes ahead of major talks.
Time now for a quick look at the headlines once again.
India ready for talks, but Pakistan must act to end Kashmir militancy, says Vajpayeee. Transporter strike enters sixth day, threatens to affect milk and water tanker movement. In Gujarat, 10 people accused in Pandya murder case booked under POTA. Maoists the Nepalese government to hold preparatory peace talks on Monday.
That's all we have for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Hello and welcome to News at this hour. I'm Sandhya. We'll begin with a look at the headlines. In Kashmir for over a decade and declared its designs would not succeed. Addressing the convocation of Kashmir University, the Prime Minister said the people who supported militancy were against the basic ethos of Kashmiri culture and Sufi Islam.
Prime Minister Vajpayeee said an objective examination would show that those who support militancy are against the basic ethos of Kashmiri culture of peace, brotherhood and friendship. Vajpayeee quoted a famous Kashmiri philosopher who had said, "Do not divide Hindus and Muslims." He appealed to the people to shun the gun culture and asserted that India will not allow Pakistan to succeed in its designs.
Also started a process of talks with elected representatives and other sections of public opinion in the state. I believe, and I would like one and all in Jammu and Kashmir to share this belief that there is no problem which cannot be resolved peacefully and democratically. Today our sincere commitment to bring peace and normalcy to Jammu and Kashmir makes me admit that we have often faltered in our journey towards this goal.
The Prime Minister lauded the people of Kashmir for coming out in good numbers to express the power of democracy and said the centre had fulfilled its promise of holding free and fair elections. And the state government had taken some good steps, he said. Mr. Vajpayeee assured them, "We will work in tandem with the state government for the betterment of the state."
And not remain obsessed with
Truckers on the sixth day of their indefinite strike have threatened to stop movement of so far exempted milk and water tankers. Petrol and LPG tanker owners have decided to join the strike on Sunday. Prime Minister Vajpayeee has convened a meeting with representatives of the All India Motor Transport Congress on Sunday to seek a way out of the crisis.
In Tamil Nadu, the truckers' indefinite strike demanding stable diesel prices, scrapping of VAT and repeal of the order to junk 15-year-old trucks has led to a pileup of over 350 crore rupees worth of goods at the Chennai port. Other goods lay at railway stations and godowns. Reacting to Petroleum Minister Ram Naik's announcement that states can invoke ESMA to end the strike, the truckers have decided to intensify their agitation. They said they will pull milk and water tankers also out on strike.
The SARS case has tested positive this time in Delhi. A 42-year-old New Zealander who was admitted to the Ram Manohar Lohia Hospital on the 16th of April tested positive for SARS on Saturday, according to preliminary reports. The director of the National Institute of Communicable Diseases, Dr. Shivlal, said 100% sequencing of his blood is being carried out to ascertain the genetic character of the coronavirus for a final conclusion. The results were expected by Saturday night. Meanwhile, the New Zealander's condition is reported to be improving under treatment. Officials in Delhi are trying to trace the other passengers who travelled with him from Bangkok to New Delhi. Only on Friday, India's first case of confirmed SARS was discharged completely cured from a Goa hospital. Meanwhile, manufacturers of medical equipment in the country have reported brisk sale of surgical masks that will protect against SARS virus. They say the sales have picked up manifold ever since the virus swept across East Asian countries.
The severe acute respiratory syndrome SARS has proved to be a boon for medical equipment manufacturers in India. Health authorities in the affected countries have prescribed the wearing of surgical masks to help contain the virus. Praveen Narang, an exporter of surgical mask sets, sales to the affected countries and aid agencies is booming.
Well, there is a big increase. I would say there's an increase in terms of percentage. I would say more than 50%, 60% increase in inquiries as well as orders for masks. Since this last 1 month of SARS, there's been tremendous increase.
The international demand for the masks has not been reflected in the domestic market because so far there has only been one confirmed case of SARS in India and the patient has already recovered. However, the government has taken preventive measures and the medical community has been cautious as SARS has the potential to spread rapidly in India owing to the country's dense population.
The Gujarat government has invoked the POTA against 10 people for their alleged involvement in the murder of former Gujarat Home Minister Harin Pandya. The 10 include 5 alleged ISI agents recently arrested by the Ahmedabad crime branch.
Gujarat's Minister of
said that misuse of discretionary funds during the tenures of 3 BJP chief ministers and herself since 1994 would also be probed. She directed officials not to arrest Samajwadi Party leaders charged with misuse of discretionary funds merely on the basis of FIRs against them without getting court clearance.
UP Chief Minister Mayawati said impartial and fair inquiries would be conducted into the various cases since 1994 to establish that the money sanctioned by the government for discretionary funds was not misused. Mayawati said BJP Chief Ministers Kalyan Singh, Ram Prakash Gupta and Rajnath Singh would also come under the scanner. When asked about such cases during the tenure of Congress leader Motilal Vora as governor, she said she would not take any action that would undermine the authority and sanctity of the governor's office. She said inquiries into these cases would be limited to the misuse of funds by the beneficiaries.
A batch of Sikh pilgrims who had gone to Pakistan to take part in Vajpayeee celebrations have said President Pervez Musharraf has promised to take steps to preserve Sikh monuments and cultural landmarks.
कृपया ध्यान दीजिए चेन्नई से चलकर नक्का के रास्ते जम्मू तवी को जाने वाली
A contingent of 27 Sikh pilgrims returned to New Delhi from Pakistan for Baisakhi celebrations. The pilgrims said Pakistan President General Pervez Musharraf had promised to take steps to preserve Sikh monuments and cultural landmarks.
There was a chance meeting with President Pervez Musharraf in Rawalpindi, and he has assured us that his government will take every possible step so that every Sikh shrine and also its culture is preserved and saved from deterioration.
Every year, a large number of Sikh pilgrims from India visit Pakistan to participate in the annual religious festival of Baisakhi at Nankana Sahib and Panja Sahib Gurudwaras.
In Kathmandu, the Nepalese government and Maoist rebels will hold initial level talks on Monday for lasting peace in the Himalayan kingdom. The 6-member government team headed by Deputy Prime Minister Baldev Prasad Mandal and the 5-member Maoist team led by Baburam Bhattarai will meet for what they have called introductory talks. Official sources said issues relating to implementation of a code of conduct, procedure and agenda for the main talks will come up for discussion during the initial level talks on Monday. The Maoist guerrillas are fighting since 1996 to overthrow the constitutional monarchy in Nepal and set up a one-party communist rule. They had walked out of the last peace talks in November 2001. In some more news, the Medical Representatives Association has announced it will undertake a countrywide strike on the 12th of next month, demanding the government to bring down the prices of essential medicines. Announcing this at a news conference, the Deputy General Secretary of the Medical Representatives Association of Tamil Nadu, Ramesh Chandar, said the sellout of pharmaceutical companies by both the central and state governments was responsible for the hike in prices of essential medicines. He also demanded the government ban the selling of medicines in the black market and ban the selling of fake medicines.
Journalists Associations condemned Nakkiran Gopal's arrest and drop charges against Gopal. It has also been decided to organize an all-India conference of artists, writers and journalists in Chennai to protest invoking of POTA against journalists.
DMK President M. Karunanidhi has urged the central government to withdraw the draconian POTA to save freedom and liberty in the country. He said the AIADMK in Tamil Nadu has been using POTA to wreak vengeance on its political opponents. He accused Chief Minister Jayalalitha of misleading people by giving false statements in the State Assembly. He was referring to her remarks that terrorists had a free run during the previous DMK regime and they were dealt with an iron fist in the AIADMK's rule.
In a statement issued in Chennai, Karunanidhi explained with statistics the steps taken during his chief ministership to counter terrorist activities and the Veerappan menace. He said the DMK government arrested 135 Veerappan associates between June 1996 and November 2000, while the AIADMK government had arrested 121 Veerappan aides between 1991 and May 1996. Karunanidhi has appealed to the DMK cadres to carry this message to the people. He accused the AIADMK government of misusing POTA by arresting at least 20 politicians, including MDMK General Secretary Vaiko, to settle political scores. Karunanidhi has demanded the repeal of POTA to protect freedom and liberty in India.
Karu city is feeling the pinch of the strikes called by truck owners, mosquito net manufacturers and textile producers all at the same time. This has created great difficulty for the lakhs of people who depend on these industries for their livelihood. People in Karu say the money circulation has come to a standstill following these incidents.
Tirupur is known for knitwear goods. Karur is synonymous with handloom textile goods. Protesting the proposal to levy 10% SEMVAT, the textile producers have stopped production since 24th March. This has led to lakhs of people losing their jobs. Another industry that is famous in Karur is the mosquito net manufacturing. The manufacturers have also been on an indefinite strike against the tax on mosquito nets. The units were closed 20 days ago protesting excise duty on products. Over 50,000 to 55,000 workers have become unemployed, besides a production loss of 6 crore rupees. This has affected the circulation of money, and if the situation continues, there may be starvation deaths. Adding to Karur's woes, the movement of trucks has come to a grinding halt due to the nationwide strike by lorry owners. This has adversely affected the livelihood of over 1 lakh workers both directly and indirectly. Following the strikes by lorry owners, textile and mosquito net manufacturers, there is hardly any circulation of money.
If the situation continues, where can we go? Over 50,000 people out of jobs without any income.
People fear that if the situation continues, starvation deaths will start occurring in Karur. They have urged the state and central governments to intervene and take speedy measures to avoid such a situation.
6 teams of the Tamil Nadu police have been set up to trace the 2 armed youth who shot dead 3 men and injured 2 others in their robbery at a jewellery shop in Vellore on Friday night. The police teams are spreading out to 4 other states on the theory that the killers are Naxalites, probably from Andhra Pradesh. Jewellery shops in Vellore stayed closed on Saturday, demanding protection for their shops.
Soon after nightfall on Friday, 2 young men entered Naga Jewellers in Vellore main bazaar, posing as customers.
Helped create Dolly, the first cloned sheep, was recently in Bangalore. Coleman, who was one of the key speakers at Bio 2003, the 3rd annual biotechnology trade show, said the reproductive cloning of human beings is immoral.
Well, it depends whether you mean how ethical is it as applied to humans, to animals. I've always been very comfortable with its application to animals, as long as, with the usual constraints on making sure the animals don't suffer unnecessarily in the studies. I've always also been consistent in thinking it was immoral to extend the reproductive cloning to human beings.
He, however, added that it would be very soon that people would agree with the concept, like every other scientific experiment, which does receive negative responses during the initial stages.
I think it's undoubtedly true that people can misuse any scientific developments. I mean, you only have to look at kidney transplantation, pioneered about 30 years ago. When it was initiated, people thought it was terrible. But nowadays, people think it's a very good thing, yet we hear...
Speaking about the death of Dolly, he said there was no evidence that Dolly's death was related to her being cloned.
Director General of the Central Reserve Police Force, S.C. Chaubey, said Pakistan's ISI is using Bangladesh to foment trouble in India. He accused Islamabad of trying to create a cross-border terrorism situation like the one in Jammu and Kashmir in India's eastern and northeastern states as well.
The emerging trend
Clashes that left 3 people dead and 8 others injured. The clashes, which may threaten the current Sri Lankan peace process, was sparked by the abduction of 2 Muslim monks, allegedly by the LTTE. But the Tigers have denied the charge. Thousands of Muslims have reportedly fled the region. Meanwhile, Norwegian monitors, currently supervising the government LTTE ceasefire, are trying to set up a meeting on Sunday between the LTTE and Muslim leaders.
The Sri Lankan government has poured troops into the eastern area following the LTTE Muslim clashes. The unrest highlighted the long-standing friction between the two Tamil-speaking groups. A decade ago, the LTTE was accused of ethnic cleansing of Jaffna Peninsula by evicting the Muslims. The tension has put pressure on Sri Lanka's Muslim Affairs Minister Rauf Hakim to pull out the government.
Giving a very serious warning to the government, because how can I, when my people are not secure, how do you expect me to be part of this?
Hakim said the communal clash may affect the ongoing peace process. The LTTE and the Sri Lankan government are due to hold a 7th round of peace talks later this month in Thailand.
News now from the business world. From the 1st of May, incoming calls will become free for cellular subscribers. Telecom operators have agreed on a methodology for implementation of interconnect usage charges regime. This has also paved the way for new tariff packages for basic telephony to become operational as scheduled from the 1st of May. TRAI Chairman Pradeep Baijal said in New Delhi that the operators have unanimously accepted a generic interim solution on the method for implementation.
US and Britain have destroyed Iraq. They should rebuild it, says Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad. US Army takes over control of Baghdad from the Marines.
Varang
news now from the world scene. Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has said the United States and Britain should take on the responsibility to rebuild Iraq, especially since they are the countries that destroyed it. Not mincing his words, Mahathir said military action against Iraq had been unwarranted.
No, I think lots of other people can reconstruct. If they know how to destroy Iraq, they should know how to rebuild Iraq.
Criticizing the US, Mahathir said the world will have to accustom itself to living with one superpower, the US. Mahathir said the US will not think twice about using force or taking unilateral decisions to achieve its ends.
Countries, so that
US Marines have been pulled out from the streets of Baghdad. They are being replaced by small groups of the US Army infantry following Friday's massive anti-American demonstrations. The protests were a warning of hostility the US may face in coming weeks in Iraq. Meanwhile, foreign ministers of countries neighboring Iraq met in Riyadh. The Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Prince Saud Al Faisal said the US-led forces who invaded Iraq had no legitimate right to exploit its oil, and UN sanctions should end only when Iraq has a legitimate government in place.
The US Marines have left Baghdad after tens of thousands of protesters demanded that the United States leave Iraq. Meanwhile, foreign ministers of Iraq's neighboring countries met in Riyadh. They called on
North Korea has announced it is successfully reprocessing more than 8,000 spent nuclear fuel rods. The step could allow the country to produce atomic weapons. The announcement lent an extra edge to the three-nation consultations held in Washington on Friday on the North Korean nuclear crisis.
North Korea's official news agency, the KCNA, issued a statement in English that Pyongyang was successfully reprocessing more than 8,000 spent nuclear fuel rods. It was a dramatic escalation of the North Korean nuclear crisis. It set in doubt whether the United States would attend the first formal talks with China and North Korea, tentatively scheduled in Beijing next week, on ending Pyongyang's suspected atomic weapons program. Diplomats from the US, Japan and South Korea held consultations on the crisis in Washington on Friday. The State Department said that according to its translation of a Korean language report, North Korea was on the verge of India ready for talks, but Pakistan must act to end Kashmir militancy, says Vajpayeee. Transporter strike enters 6th day, threatens to affect milk and water tanker movement. In Gujarat, 10 people accused in Pandya murder case booked under POTA. Maoists the Nepalese government to hold preparatory peace talks on Monday.
That's all we have for this edition. Thanks for joining us.